The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Welcome to all of our new members who signed up over the weekend and have this today, February 27th, as their first new bonus show. Pat and I witnessed a pretty bad car accident over the weekend. As some of you know, segment producer Rachel Gordon took a full-time job, and she told us about it at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Her last day on the show was a couple weeks ago, and different people were away and unavailable at different times. So we had a little sort of going away gathering with Rachel over the weekend, and any number of people were there, including Ben Dixon, interns were there, all sorts of people. And afterwards, a group of us, me, Pat, Ben Dixon's intern, as well as my girlfriend, were walking sort of in the direction of home and the subway, depending on who we're talking about. And as we were just kind of walking, all of a sudden I hear tires screeching and something just doesn't sound quite right.
We both hear something before we see anything, that's for
Absolutely.
sure.
And I start sort of looking around because it's getting louder and louder. And then I turn and I see a four-door sedan flying around a corner. It just doesn't look right. They're going way too fast to make the turn that they're attempting to make. The car skids, careens onto a curb, hits not one of those hugely aggressive cement barriers, but a sort of barrier, one of like the metal ones, I think it was, that was on the side of the road around the turn. Smoke pours out of the car.
Yes.
It goes from, I don't know, 30 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour in a fraction of a second. You hear popping noises, crunching noises, and smoke is coming out. This was across a 3-lane road from us. I would say, what would you say, 30 feet away?
30 feet away, yeah, that sounds about right. And I mean, my first instinct was to think, is this car going to cause anything to fall down? Because sometimes it'll hit one of those lights or something, and that thing falling down could be even more dangerous than the car accident itself.
Indeed.
Luckily, we were on the other side of the street. I mean, the other side had a sidewalk too, so we could have just as easily been walking along that
Absolutely.
side. Yeah, very scary stuff for sure.
Fortunately, we weren't injured, but then the immediate question became, is anyone in the car injured? There was a bicyclist who was right there who went immediately over. I pulled out my phone and immediately just called 911 and said, there's been a car accident. It's pretty bad. I described where we were. And while we're on the phone, a back door opens. The driver doesn't seem to be moving. Back door opens, and people just start pouring out. Very well-dressed women who seem to have been going like to a club or something like that. This
was
was
like a clown car.
It was like a clown car. People just pouring out of this car, okay? They seem sort of stunned, but okay. And while I'm on the phone, a couple of them, again, the driver still hasn't left the car. A couple of these passengers go to the front of the car. The car is up on the curb. I couldn't see the far side, but I would have guessed that at least one tire had been popped because of
we couldn't really assess the damage from where we were.
It was
but
hard
you
to
would
assess.
imagine, I mean, they hit the curb at such a force that there definitely was some damage there. And I would have to imagine that the front right tire at least was popped.
At minimum. They start trying to push the car back. They seem very eager to get out of there. Now, what crossed my mind immediately is, this is a very drunk driver. They recognize that this is a drunk driver, and it's crossing their mind to try to leave the scene of the crime, because if the police show up, they're going to obviously tell that they're drunk. And so the 911 operator says, are they trying to leave? And I said, they are trying to push the car off the curb. It seems as though they might be trying to leave. And the bicyclist who initially went over to help, I think, realized the same thing, because he immediately took a picture of the license plate, I think, planning ahead in case these individuals try to get out of there.
So it's tough to think about how people would react in these situations, but you'd have to imagine if they were sober, they would have taken their time more, probably assess the damage. That's probably what they would have done first. And
if I see smoke pouring out of a car also, the first thing I might do is get away from the car.
You gotta get out of the car. They were staying in the car.
Right.
But clearly people were all right. And I mean, it was just very bizarre. You see these women in heels trying to push the car. Not going to happen most likely.
It was surreal.
And they were seriously trying to get out of the way there.
Yeah. So
take,
within about,
leave.
I don't know, 2 minutes, I would say, fire truck shows up. And I would say 30 seconds later.
Because 3 people call 911.
Right. When I was on the phone and other people were on the phone, everybody was being told other people are calling us. So fire truck shows up within about 2 minutes. 30 seconds later, Boston police shows up. 30 seconds later, state police shows up. And at that point, we walked away. I don't know what ultimately happened. I sort of scoured the police reports for it.
Oh,
and,
yeah?
and didn't find anything.
You said you tried to find your 911 call.
It occurred to me that it might be interesting to find the 911 call, because when these things happen, you're sort of so shell-shocked that I wonder how stunned I sound when I'm reporting what happened, because we all were sort of looking and we knew like it wasn't right. What happened didn't make sense because this is not what we're used to seeing. But it was like, well, what do we do?
Because it's the thing is, they were coming after a turn, right? And when you take a turn, you slow down. You're going maybe 15, 20 miles an hour so you can get the angle right. I mean, they just kept their normal speed. And I don't know if there was a light that they had to cross first, but they tried to just bang the turn at like 40 miles an hour. It just wasn't going to happen.
Absolutely insane. And the thing, I was thinking two things afterwards. One was, we're lucky that we crossed the street on the side we were on instead of on the side they were on, because even if we hadn't been hit, we would have been, if we were across the street, we would have been on the sidewalk, basically right where they went up on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and like we said, we heard anything before we saw it, so there was probably not going to be any reaction time for us to get out of the way there.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that crossed my mind was, fortunately, I've never been in a major car accident, but I've been rear-ended a couple of times, and they were not big things, right? It was like 10 miles an hour. Once I think it was 15. Even that made my head snap back and hit my headrest in a way where immediately it hurt. And even for the next several days, it hurt. And those were very small things. This car went from, like I said, 30 or 40 miles an hour to 0 in a very aggressive way. It was hard to imagine that people would not have been hurt.
I mean, I would imagine they were drinking at the time, so while they may not have felt it that night, you have to imagine the next day when sobriety kicks in, they're going to be feeling it. And we don't really know the aftermath. We don't know if someone was arrested. The driver, I guess, would have to be arrested if he was drinking and cited for something. But we don't know if they were taken for the hospital. We didn't want to stay in the aftermath too much, because you don't want to just be the guy who hangs out and sees the whole scene unfold afterwards.
What the car accidents you've been in, were they relatively minor?
Yeah, so it was a few months after I got my license, when I was 16 years old.
Oh, dear.
I was borrowing my sister's Pontiac Grand Am, and we were all driving home from high school at the end of the day. So there's a line of cars of all 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. You can imagine that gets pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
And I had to just stop, kind of short for something. The car in front of me had done the same thing. It was a little bit of a short stop, but nothing that would cause an accident for sure. And the girl behind me, I don't know if she was texting or just distracted or just an inexperienced driver, plowed right into me. And I'm in a Pontiac Grand Am, and she has this Jeep Patriot. And it completely just inverted my trunk. It was terrible. And the worst thing about it maybe was the fact that I had just got my license. So everyone, my family included, had thought that I was, of course, the person who caused the accident. Is like, oh, yeah, you're an inexperienced driver. Of course that happened. Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't your fault. But I was like, no, I have to explain. Like, it was another inexperienced driver that caused this accident.
There's this thing where I think it applies in every state where if you are rear-ended, the person who did the rear-ending is considered to be at fault for insurance purposes. I've not heard of any exceptions to that rule. Although, do you agree with that? Is that what you're familiar with?
Yeah, because I think even if the car in front of you stops short, you're still responsible for your own vehicle.
Because you should be a safer distance, right?
Right, absolutely.
I can imagine a situation where if you're on the highway, where you wouldn't assume that anyone for no reason would slam on their brakes. If I'm driving on the highway at 65 and I just slam on my brakes for no reason, I could probably cause someone, even who's at a safe distance, to hit me. It seems a little unfair that would still be the person behind me's fault. Although maybe these like one-off situations that I'm imagining would be dealt with differently, because you would see skid marks and police could determine that I had slammed on my brakes in a way so as to cause someone to rear-end me or something. You know?
Could definitely hit another car and have that person be at fault, because, I mean, like if they run a red light or, if they don't stop or they're going at a bad speed. You know what I did want to talk about, though, was your decision to call 911, because I was questioning that at first.
So right afterwards, Pat said to me, wait, did you call 911? And I said, of course. Who
I didn't
am I
know
going to call?
You called a department or something. Or...
Well, no, because, if in order to not call 911, but to let police know about what's going on, I would need to know exactly which police precinct is responsible for the area I'm in. Very few people know that unless it's like your neighborhood and you know exactly where the police station is, or it's a small town or something like that. So I always was taught, especially if someone might be hurt, you call 911, they'll figure out who to send. And indeed, they sent both state and local police because of the proximity, I think, to the highway. It might have even been technically considered highway because we were directly below a highway. And they sent out firefighters who are trained first responders. It's not me. I shouldn't be the one determining whether this is a non-emergency call. It's an accident where somebody might be hurt.
Yeah, it was clear. I mean, it at least seemed clear to us that no one was hurt in this accident, but you don't know.
I don't know. The driver wasn't moving.
Right. Oh, really? Wasn't moving?
They
or
stayed
just
in the car.
They wouldn't get out of the car.
Yeah, and I couldn't see any movement.
Yeah, I mean, I've always just thought that, you call 911 for life or death emergencies.
No.
And it was clear that they were going to make it out fine. So, yes, they need to get, emergency people there, but I don't know. I've always just thought that 911 wasn't the right way to go.
I think you said the right thing, which is they were going to get emergency people there, right? The firefighters showed up with their lights and sirens on.
Yeah.
To me, that means that a 911 call was the right place to call.
Okay.
I don't know. What is the
I just
audience
had some
think?
bad experience with this.
With calling 911?
Well, I didn't call it, but I was playing basketball with some friends, and one of the kids I was playing with fell down and claimed to break his leg. It ended up just being like a sprain or something minor. And he was freaking out and saying, call an ambulance. I need an ambulance. And I'm just thinking here, 911 is for life or death emergencies. We could just pick you up and carry you over to a car and take you to the hospital ourselves. You won't have to pay for $2,000 for an ambulance charge. I mean, why you wouldn't need to call 911 in this instance.
Sure.
So I guess I just had it in my mind that unless someone was about to die, or if they were in a situation where they could face some sort of danger, like if that car was in the middle of the road, then you call 911. But it seemed like everything was fine enough to a point where that wouldn't be necessary.
Well, reasonable people can disagree, and I predict the audience will side with me on this one.
I think I've already sided with you.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
good.
Maybe it just took this experience to waken me up to that.
Maybe so. Elon Musk from SpaceX has tweeted yesterday, SpaceX announcement tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's today at 4 p.m. Eastern time, which is after we wrap up the show. So by the time you hear this, he may have made the announcement. My prediction is it's a Mars-related announcement. It's something about a more specific timeline for going to Mars. That's what I think it's going to be related to, and I'm excited.
I wonder when the goal is going to be set to, because we've heard numbers like in the 2030s decades, somewhere in there.
But originally SpaceX was saying 2018 they're sending the first supply mission or something to Mars.
I would imagine that's pushed back, though.
It's pretty optimistic, but it's possible that they could still. I mean, if they're a year from launching and it's a 4-month trip, that still would mean that by late June, early July of 2018, they could have something on Mars, which would be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we already have the Curiosity rover on there.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not really going to get too excited unless
it's manned.
They start putting people on there, or at least animals or something.
But a lot of these plans for putting people on Mars are based on first sending a couple of supply missions so that there are supplies waiting in order to build habitats or whatever. So I would still be excited if this is part of a series of manned missions to Mars.
Yeah, you definitely have to get the infrastructure set in place, because these people are not promised a trip back.
No, and there's different plans. That's one thing, which is some of the Mars plans are designed as one-way trips, and others are not. Obviously, the ones that are designed as return trips are far more complicated, because you've got to carry with you the fuel and supplies, the fuel to get off of the planet and make it back to Earth, as well as supplies for the return trip. So, and infinitely more complicated for the return trips.
Yeah, I think you gotta do the return trip, especially the first time, because I mean, if you think about the first time we went to the moon in 1969, it was impressive not only that we got there, but that we safely returned the people home.
Yeah.
I mean, people are still willing to sign up, even though they're only guaranteed a one-way trip.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just for morale to start getting people to want to visit there, it would be important that we get those people back, and they could tell about their experience here.
Former producer Lewis said that he'd be willing to do a one-way after there were, I think it was like 150 people living on Mars. Is there a number that would get you to say, I am relocating to Mars for the rest of my life? A number of people that you would want to see there?
No, I mean, I'm happy with Earth. I think we got some pretty cool things here. We have like oceans and,
Atmosphere.
a better climate.
For now, a better climate.
Well, it's funny how like Lewis may only end up moving out of the Boston area once
he goes to Mars. Yeah, I would go only, I think, if a return trip were possible. And I would only consider relocating to Mars if life would be not more difficult there than it is here, which could happen if climate change really, really gets very bad here.
Or if we live just very, very long lives.
That's true. That's true. All right, that's it for the bonus show. Talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.